Hello, hello. Chase the Traveler back with a new episode. So, some people want to know. Some people want to know if they move to Japan with their family, will things work out smoothly? Well, again, it depends on what you really feel is important. There are definitely some pros and there are definitely some cons. Now, you know, a lot of times when I put out a video, a lot of people are talking about, oh, well, you know something, America's very, very dangerous. You know, Japan is safe, blah, blah, blah. And I'm concerned. Now, safety in Japan is definitely not an issue most of the time. I'm not going to tell you that Japan is extremely safe because I know that sometimes it isn't. But if you're comparing it to a lot of the crime that you're going to encounter in certain parts of the world, then yeah, Japan might be a little bit safer. You're not going to have the drug problem that you have in the US. And you're definitely not going to find that in the high schools. You're definitely not going to find that in the junior high schools, which in the US, drugs, definitely, you're going to start finding that probably in junior high school. Now, I have seen kids smoking in the bathroom in the junior high schools. I have seen them get suspended for smoking in the bathroom in high schools. But I've never really seen any kind of big drug activity. Now, so, you might not have a drug problem if your kids go to school in Japan, or let's say you take a 10-year-old kid and you bring him to Japan. You might not have a drug problem. You might not even have to worry about that. I mean, the other day I saw a parent get arrested because her 10-year-old kid walked from their house to the convenience store. Now, that's effing insane. I mean, when I was 6, I used to take the bus to go to school. And that was about 30 or 40 minutes away from my house. So, you're not going to have a problem like that in Japan for sure. So therefore, in that sense, your kid's definitely going to be a lot safer. But think about that. If your kid didn't start out here in the first, second, or third grade, picking up, learning how to read and write Japanese, learning how to write those characters. I mean, there's hiragana, which are wiggly squiggly lines. You have to know about 46 of those. There's katakana, which are, again, wiggly squiggly lines. No, they're not wiggly squiggly. They're geometrical lines that are used for describing foreign things, foreign names, etc., etc. You got to learn about 46 of those. Then there's kanji, which is, let's see. No, I don't see it. All right. Kanji, basically. All right, I'm not sure how clear that is for you guys, but, oh, actually, right there. All right, that's kanji, like those really, really, really difficult to read characters. It takes Japanese people pretty much a decade or more to be able to read that. So if you're bringing a 10-year-old kid who doesn't have any knowledge of Japanese, who's never written any Japanese characters, for him to catch up will take a while. Now, there are international schools over here, but then, of course, you still have to take the Japanese class. So, your kid might not have to worry about violence, but your kid will definitely have to think about catching up, especially if he didn't start out in the first grade. And that could take a toll on his mental state. Not only that, in Japan, it's a very, very homogeneous society, which means that he might be the only foreigner in that class or in that school. And there is bullying in Japan. And a lot of biracial children, foreign children, fall victim to that. So that's something that you also have to consider. Now, one thing about Japan is that if you don't really care about the type of job that you do, you're going to find a job. You don't necessarily have to be able to speak Japanese. Now, if you come from one of these English-speaking countries, you're definitely going to be able to find a job teaching English. But do you really want that type of job? Because again, a job like that is a dead-end job. You're most likely never going to get promoted. You are pretty much never going to get a raise. And those jobs are pretty much year to year, maybe 6 months, and not very stable. So nowadays you do see foreigners doing other types of jobs. I mean, I've seen them working in convenience stores, restaurants, which in the past I didn't really see them doing. So Japan's making a little progress, but I really haven't seen anybody doing any kind of like work that I would consider desirable with the benefits that I would consider desirable. I'm not saying they're not out there. I'm just saying that unless you have some real technical skills and you speak the language properly, those jobs are definitely not going to be available to you. So there are certain aspects of Japan that are very, very good, like I said, but again, I feel that a lot of those aspects that are good in Japan are primarily available to the Japanese. And foreigners have like a snippet of it. I mean, yeah. I mean, if your country's like in a war or something, then yeah, then, Japan might be for you because you're not going to have to dodge bullets. Now, in terms of like, again, a lot of people, like I said, they're talking about America. They're talking about, okay, well, safety. I'm living here and, things are really not that good. But you can't overlook the amount of opportunity that you have in America. Things are expensive. Yes, things are definitely way more expensive in America. I was in Miami a couple days ago. No. What am I talking about? About 2-3 weeks ago. I was in Texas and California. And prices are definitely way different. Over here, prices are definitely a lot cheaper. Your housing is definitely going to be, your average housing, you could find rent in a very, very small house for a family for about $500. It's not going to be like in the dead center of Tokyo. And you're not going to be in fear of your life living there. You're not going to be dodging bullets either. And like this kid that's walking right by me right now, she doesn't have to be accompanied by anybody. So things are definitely safe. Now, people are talking about these akiya. You know, I've seen like these really cheap houses in Japan. You know, I mean, am I going to go? Well, you know, let me tell you. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If it's too good to be true, then it isn't true. A lot of these houses that you see, these akiyas, are like in places where the Japanese people are leaving. Okay? So they're leaving, they don't want to stay there. So do you really think you're going to want to stay there? Now, I know that a lot of foreigners are actually going out there, they're buying them up, and they're like, you know, putting up videos onto YouTube saying how wonderful it is. And, you know, none of them have ever put out a video telling you that, oh, I bought this Akiya for $50,000. I just made $100,000 out of it after renovating it. Hasn't happened. Remember, the Japanese people don't want that house. They are pretty much running away from that neighborhood. And you're like running into it. The population of Japan is decreasing. Unless the population increases quite a bit, there isn't really going to be any demand for that house. So you pretty much, I mean, you might buy it for 50, you might have to sell it for 10. Now, if you want to live in it, then I guess it might be a good idea. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, I think that, you know, none of these places are going to be like in a desirable location. None of these akiyas. Now, another thing that, you know, let me go back to the safety issue when it comes to America. You know, America is definitely, I would say without a doubt, a little bit more, not a little bit more dangerous than Japan. Yes, that's definitely true. But the thing about it is that I don't believe you really have to go cross an ocean, get on a plane for 10 hours in order to find safety. I mean, you can find safe neighborhoods in the United States if you move 2 to 3 hours away from a major city. I'm from New York. Honestly, if I get on a train in Manhattan, take Metro North, or drive an hour and a half, 2 hours, I guarantee you, I can find a neighborhood where bullets are not going to be flying. The drug problem might still be there to a certain degree, yes. Because, I mean, drugs in America are everywhere. But it'll probably be a lot safer than a major city. So therefore, I can say with confidence that in America, if you move away from a major city, you're going to have a lot more security. You're not going to have the level of crime that you have in a major city. And you're going to have less worries. And again, like I said, Japan is definitely safer. People can get guns here legally, but it's extremely rare. You have to go through a licensing process that's probably almost like trying to work for the CIA. But some people do have guns. Now, you don't really have to speak Japanese to work here, but you do if, depending on what kind of work you want to do. Culturally, you know, culturally, you are going to have a lot of differences with Japan in terms of like how they do things, how they think. Now, there are in Japan a lot of multinational companies like Procter & Gamble, Eli Lilly. I've met with some foreigners who were hired in America some in Germany, to work with the Japanese here in that company at their office over here. And honestly, there are always problems with the way that the foreigners want to do certain things and the way that the Japanese want to do certain things. So you'll probably never hear about this on TV. I'm pretty sure you won't. You'll probably never hear about it at all unless I tell it to you. But if you go and make friends with, let's say, somebody who works for a big multinational company in Japan, and they're not like at the senior level, and they're just like, they're like, mid-level, they're working in a, like an average worker that, that was transferred to work in Japan. And you gain their confidence. They'll tell you about the issues that they have. Because again, nothing violent is happening. Nothing like, extraordinary. Nobody's like hitting each other. Nobody's like, it's not like people working at the post office in America and all of a sudden they show up one day and like shoot the place up. No, it's not like that. No, absolutely not. But, it's not as easy as it looks. And, so if you decide to, let's say, move your entire family to Japan, you might have solved a certain issue. I mean, if violence and safety was something that you really, 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 really cared about, and something that you thought about every single day, and that's the most important thing, when you come to Japan, you might feel a sense of security here. Because again, like I said, I myself, when I filmed, I filmed in South America, I filmed in multiple countries, and I'm more comfortable filming here because definitely when I walk down the street with the camera, I might get some dirty looks, which I do get some dirty looks. But I'm never like in fear that something's going to happen to me. But sometimes in South America, not necessarily America, but sometimes in South America, in America I know where to go, how to walk. I do feel a little bit of, I'm more alert. I'm more alert about who's around me, who's in front of me. I'm looking at the camera to see who's behind me. I'm looking at the viewfinder to see who's behind me. And my head is constantly on the move, looking around just to make sure. And before I even do that, I walk around the neighborhood first before I film. But I've always been safe because I use a little bit of common sense. So, of course, Japan is. I would say that, yes, you're going to have a level of safety that you probably, if you're coming from a place that's extremely dangerous, where you are always alert, you can't, walk around at night. Yeah, you'll find that over here. But then you'll have other problems to deal with. Japan is really not it's not a walk in the park. And honestly, I wouldn't want to raise kids here. And the reason I wouldn't want to raise kids here is because I think that, you'll have a kid that's a little bit closed-minded because they're not used to seeing a lot of things. And when you have a kid that's raised in an environment where they're seeing everything, they're seeing a little bit of danger, they know how to deal with that danger. That kid has a certain amount of intelligence that a lot of kids in Japan don't have. They have a certain amount of street smarts, a certain amount of common sense. And again, as a foreigner, I've said this again and again, the Japanese system works very well for Japan. It works for the Japanese people, but it's not necessarily, the system over here is not necessarily going to work for you as well. So when you come over here expecting that, okay, well, something, this Japanese person is getting this. Well, you might not get this or that. that opportunity might not be available for you. And especially if you're bringing in a kid of a certain age. I mean, most people, every kid is different. I mean, some kids adapt really quickly. Some kids are not going to adapt very, very quickly. Some kids are going to learn really quickly. Some kids are not going to learn very quickly. So depending on what kind of kid you have, it could be extremely difficult if they're not adapting. And again, if you're coming in with your wife, you might adapt, she might not. Or she might adapt, you might not. Your kid might adapt, but you too don't adapt. So I would say that the most difficult thing that's going to happen for a family who doesn't speak Japanese, and they have a kid that they have to put in school, and the kid's not like in an international school where they're taking courses in English. When that kid brings home a book and that kid has some homework, they don't understand something, you might have been able to help them back in wherever country it was that you came from. You're not going to be able to help that kid with their homework, even if it's 2 + 2, in Japan. And in America, you might be able to search something up online real quick to get them some help. If you don't speak Japanese, you're not going to be able to talk to the teacher. The teacher's going to be like not really wanting to talk to you because they're like, how do I deal with this person? I've never dealt with a foreigner before. So all those things might be an issue. I mean, again, if you don't speak Japanese, you're definitely not going to be able to read Japanese. Your kid brings stuff home, like, hey, I need help. What is this? And you're sitting over here like, oh my goodness. All of a sudden, if you want to get that kid some help, you have to spend some money. You got to spend some cash. So, yes, it is possible. I've seen people move their families over here. I mean, I'm seeing more like foreign-looking kids in Japanese schools now than I did 30, 20 years ago, for sure. I've also taught some biracial kids in Japanese schools, and they were always the quiet ones. So, it is possible depending on how determined you are. And yes, things are way more affordable in Japan today than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's a fact. They're definitely way more affordable. So if you're living in New York, you're living in LA, you're in Miami, things are definitely going to be cheaper for you here. But let me tell you, when you're trying to go to the supermarket and you don't understand the ingredients, or you don't understand 80% of the products that you see, it's not fun. When you go to a restaurant and they don't have an English menu and you're taking your translator out and the translator's not giving you an accurate description of what the menu said, it's frustrating. So, when you decide to move to a foreign country, I would say that things would have to be, especially if you have a family and you're trying to move your whole family over here, I would investigate a town 2 or 3 hours out like away from a major city first before I committed to moving to Japan, a foreign country where the culture is extremely different. And I think that it's a lot easier for people who are younger to adapt than it is for people who are over 30. And kids definitely, I would say when they're of a certain age, they're going to need a certain amount of help from their parents. And you kind of need to know what they're doing. So if you have no idea what the books that they're reading are saying, or if you can't really help them, that could be a problem. So again, yes, Japan is safer. Yes, you're not going to have a drug problem in school. People do drugs over here, though. I mean, people sell it here. But it's not going to be as prevalent in school. You're not going to have any drive-by shootings. You're not going to have any gang fights with the Bloods and the Crips. I mean, you have your Boso Zoku, but I mean, and you've got like school kids killing school kids in Japan. Yes, it does happen. It does happen. You do have a lot of bullying. So a lot of kids in Japan do commit suicide. But if you were to compare it to the United States, then of course it is safer. And of course, you have less issues to deal with. But there are issues that you will have to deal with here in Japan. So, if it was up to me, I would bring my family over here for like a month. There are certain things that there are certain places where there are certain places, there are certain cram schools in Japan called a juku. And you could put your kid there, pay for a month, put your kid there, and see how he does with the other kids before you like commit and sell everything and come down here. Because again, you don't want to be in a situation where all of a sudden you sell everything, you come down here, and then prices in America go up again, or wherever it is that you are, and now you sold everything, now you can't go back. So, for anybody thinking about bringing their family over here, I would move to Japan in increments. Little by little. Maybe the person who has the less serious job goes first to check things out. And once they're a little settled and they're like, something, I think it's okay. The coast is clear. Then the person or the family member with the most responsibility, the person making the most money, could schedule to move down permanently. Anyway, that's my take. Chase the Traveler in Japan, walking around Mikage.